Okay, everybody, welcome to part two of this discussion, the history of the Kabbalah. We've already seen how the third faction was pushing Kabbalism by marrying it to science, right? So the great learned men of science would be able to influence people, and they did through the great halls of learning across Europe. They were influencing people to ally themselves with the third faction, whether they realized it or not, by getting them to embrace the Kabbalah. And from there, they could, you know, instill in them all kinds of immorality under the guise of, mysticism and breaking their conscience so they could use them. They wanted the high society people, the thinkers, the scientifically minded, to join ranks with them and sabotage the church. People had loyalties to the church, right? And that was a big threat to their power. They wanted to strip the church of its power and fill in that power gap later. And so the way to do that, initially anyway, was to infiltrate academia, get the great thinkers on board with them, and they could help the masses to see, look, they are lying. The earth isn't the center of everything. There's other things that are getting circled, not just the earth that seemingly gets circled every day by the sun and the stars, right? Anyways, in the meantime, they started introducing the Kabbalah to the religious world through all kinds of deceptive means. One individual along this line was Abraham Abulafia. He was the 13th century Spanish or Sephardic Jewish Kabbalist who claimed that while on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, he heard a voice telling him to go back to Spain and declare himself a prophet. What a bunch of horse shit. This was the third faction, realizing that, religion was still a big factor with people. They couldn't completely pull people away from it, so they had to use religion, but yet outside the context of the Vatican, right? They had to introduce this guy who was independent of the Vatican, claiming to be a prophet. Oh, let's see what this guy has to say. God is speaking through him, right? But it's comical because his bullshit wasn't taking off like they had hoped it would. No one took him serious. They just figured that he was some born son of born into a rich family, son of a rich man who felt the need simply to make a name for himself. So they basically ignored him. Later in 1280, he said that he had another voice talking to him that gave him a more startling message. This voice, he said, urged him to convert Pope Nicholas III to Judaism. So Abulafia went to see the Pope, who gave him a private audience. But when the Pope heard his message, he hit the ceiling and ordered him to be burned at the stake. But then, surprise of all surprises, this same Pope conveniently died just 3 days later. Abulafia, predictably, was able to weasel his way out of going to the stake, apparently by wowing his captors with his Kabbalistic ramblings, maybe a few magic tricks, right? Obviously, this Pope, recognized that this guy was either just a complete crackpot or that he was a third factioner trying to seize his power, right? He saw through it. Whatever. The Pope conveniently died. How much you want to bet he was poisoned? Anyway, Abulafia then relocated to Sicily, where yet another voice, he claimed, had spoken to him and now upgraded him to the status of Messiah. This was an early attempt to pull off a sabotage Zevi, Kabbalistic movement, right? But it wasn't going quite so well. Many of the local rabbis weren't buying his story, And so he disappeared off the historical record after that point. Just like with Zevi, many rabbis rejected Zevi too, right? This was an attempt, again, by the third faction to hijack not just Christianity, but Judaism itself with the Kabbalah, right? To win them over to the Kabbalah and not so heavily toward the Torah. They wanted them away from all standards of morality. This was an early attempt at this very thing. One spring morning in 1502, Asher Lemlin, a young Jewish Kabbalah student in Venice, woke up one day, we're told, with the realization that he was Elijah the prophet. Here they are, pulling this shit again. He claimed that he had been returned to earth to announce the coming of the Messiah that very year, provided that the people would fast and purify themselves in preparation. So here now was another figure being raised up by the third faction, right, to rally a lot of Jews. And then it was hoped in time Gentiles too, but initially Jews behind this guy, and to get into the Kabbalah. Many Jews did rally behind this guy, kissed the hem of his garment, adored him as a prophet, and suspected that he himself might be the Messiah, but was just too modest to admit it. Oh my God. Yep. All you got to do is profess to be the Messiah. And even if you don't get the rabbinate behind you, you'll get a good many low-level Jews. And that's all you need. And that's what, the Christ character was all about, Judas Christus, right? Getting the masses of Jews behind him. And if the priesthood couldn't be rallied to your side, well, you just scheme and scam so you can get the Romans to take them out, which is what happened. Anyway, even his own grandfather, we're told, destroyed his oven for baking Passover matzos. He was so appalled over what he was doing. He was convinced. Actually, he didn't do it out of not buying his grandson's story. He did buy it. He destroyed his oven because he believed that the next matzos would be baked in Jerusalem alongside his messianic grandson. So he felt that, there's no need for this oven anymore to bake matzos. He is the Messiah. And the next baking will take place in Jerusalem. He's going to establish, why Jerusalem? Because that's where the Messiah had always been believed would set up, Jewland again, right? The Jews would reign supreme over the world, the Jew world order, from Palestine, or from, more specifically, Jerusalem, right? Next year in Jerusalem, they would always toast. So here you go. This is what Jewish messianism has always been about, setting up a throne where God's kingdom, or the kingdom of heaven, can reign supreme. That's what it meant. That's what it always meant. That's what it meant in the first century with the insurrectionists. When they claimed to be Messiah, they knew that the people would rally behind them and think, oh, this is the guy who's going to set up Israel and rule the world from here. This is going to be our king, King David, and or our prophet and Messiah, blah, blah, blah. And that's what, those are the roles that Christ set himself up to assume. Not only the king of David's line, but also their priest, the priestly and the kingly Messiah. That's why he wanted to get rid of John the Baptist, right? That's why he never visited John the Baptist or said anything in his favor to try to get him released. No, he wanted him dead so he wouldn't have any competition. John the Baptist was of the priestly line. That would have meant that Christ was subordinate to him and would have to remain subordinate to him. No, he didn't want that. He wanted to be the big man on campus and fulfill both priestly and kingly Messiah positions. Anyway, so as you can see, The Kabbalists wanted to fool Jews every bit as much as Gentiles with their little hocus pocus. One sunny day in Venice in 1524, a man named David Ruveni had appeared on a white horse, proclaiming himself as the brother of the king of the tribe of Reuben, who was the commander of thousands of fierce Jewish warriors in Arabia. So this was a messianic type figure as well. And so he said that he was stationed at the rear of the Turkish lines, this great leader that he came to announce. So again, this was more goddamn third faction trickery to work on the Jews, to get them rallied behind this cause of, rising to power. And of course, it was hoped ultimately to completely take down the Vatican. That did happen, but not in the time frame they wanted. Just like in the first century, they wanted Rome taken out, right? That didn't happen. Not in the time frame they wanted. It did happen centuries later. What did happen, though, is they got rid of the Jewish priesthood. The temple was destroyed. They got them out of the way. Anyway, this David Ruveni then said that he came on a diplomatic mission for his brother to win the support of the Pope for a Jewish crusade against the infidels, the Turkish hordes, the Muslims that were controlling Jerusalem. They had failed in previous centuries, right, with all the crusades to take over Jerusalem. They did have control of it for a time, but they lost it. So they wanted to win it back once and for all. So now he's calling on the Pope, of course, to join his crusade. It was all bullshit, the whole story, right? But it didn't matter because they figured if you could get the Pope behind this cause and start another crusade, then we might be able to do it this time successfully. Win back Jewland. The reigning Pope, Clement the Seventh, was so impressed with this lunatic's charisma. Yeah, he probably got a tip in advance. Hey, yeah, we're going to send this guy. You're in on this with us now. There were some popes on occasion who were Kabbalists that were third factioners and were in on third faction scheming, right? And so, yeah, he liked the sound of this. And so he granted him an audience. The Pope found Ruveni's claims legit. Yeah, it's all arranged ahead of time. And so he solicited the support of the King of Portugal, the head of the Jewish royal bloodline in Portugal. Many Jews were now convinced that Ruveni must be the Messiah. And with the Pope on board now, the Christians across Europe thought that, this must be a movement of God. Look at this, guys. Again, an early version of Roman Catholic Christian Zionism. And all based on Kabbalic, manipulation, Kabbalistic manipulations. Ruveni then headed on his horse to meet with the Portuguese king, waving a Jewish flag, of course, high in the air. And the Christian world, for the most part, fell for this because it came stamped with approval from the Pope. Once in Lisbon, Ruveni and the king, John III, discussed which weapons should be sent to the alleged lost tribe of Reuben to help fight the infidels. Look at this. All fairy tales, all bullshit. The king had so warmed up to Ruveni that he halted persecution of Marrano Jews. You see? So a double whammy. This was getting support now for taking over Jerusalem, a new crusade, but also for stopping the persecution of Marrano Jews. Christians would have gone along with it at this point because, what's that? The Pope approves of this guy? This must be a great movement of God. This was prophesied that this would happen in the last days. Their own preachers were telling them this, right? Going along with it. So here we have the third faction in bed at this time with both the Vatican and at least some of the royal line kings, right? This was a group effort. They had successfully infiltrated by turning them on to the Kabbalah, successfully infiltrated, or just outright, in some cases, replaced some high-level officials in the church, in the state, whatever. So it looked like, oh, hey, things are going great here. Things are going according to plan. We're getting top leaders in the other two factions on our side, and the masses are falling for this movement. Things look, really good for them at this point. But then pandemonium soon broke out. Many Jews were hailing Reuveni as the Messiah in the streets, and many Christians began converting to Judaism. This drove local priests and inquisitors into a frenzy. They started to realize, hey, wait a minute. Even though some at the top were going along with this, the curia were seeing this as a scam, right? They recognized something isn't right here. We're going to lose our power. So anyway, this drove Reuveni now to beat a hasty retreat back to Italy where the Pope could protect him because the people were rising up. He was afraid they were going to rip him limb from limb. Well, the curia were, and we're getting a lot of people now on their side, convinced that this was a scam after all. As the momentum began to change, soon thereafter, John III went back to persecuting Marranos, and the newly converted Christians were sent to the stake, so things were backfiring. As always, just look at the havoc that these monstrosities have created over the centuries. Everywhere they go, guys, whether it's the first section or third faction or a combination thereof, look at the bullshit they have pawned off on the crowds, and every time the masses have fallen for it. Jew and Gentile alike, right? Because they're, these things are designed to fool both. Anyway, once back in Italy, Reuveni was joined by a man named Diego Pires, who was a crypto Jewish Christian, Portuguese Marrano Jew. Pires soon changed his name to Solomon Molko. And even though he supposedly had previously known nothing about Judaism, was now an expert on the topic because of divine magical powers, of course. And in fact, that's what he said, that, these Jewish truths, his understanding of the Torah was divinely, handed over to him, just like what a lot of Christians say about Jesus, right? The scribes and Pharisees said, from whence did he learn these great things? He didn't go to our schools. So they'll say that God revealed it to him. Right. When he had been spending most of his life over in Egypt learning at the feet of the Therapeutae. That's where he fucking learned everything from. Divinely taught. You're divinely stupid for falling for that book. Anyway, just like I was divinely stupid for falling for it years ago. What a bunch of malarkey. Yeah, guys, I was a victim of Jewish propaganda for the majority of my life. Not happy to admit that. But look at this. Look how through the centuries, all they had to do is pull out some monkey out of the mothballs that, had a captivating voice, charismatic speaker, and bang, they'd pump him with shekels so that he could spread his bullshit across the countryside. They'd do their part to help, advance the cause everywhere they could, pull some strings here and there, manipulate a few people at the top. But, it didn't always work. There were times like this when it would backfire. But they're relentless, right? They'll step back, wait a little while, and try it again. If not in that same region, they'll try it in another region. They're fucking relentless and have been so for countless centuries on end. Too bad that we, the Goyim, weren't as relentless in paying attention to them and, ensuring that their fucking schemes didn't work. Just by paying attention, by being aware of their little sleazy tactics and crying foul every time, they never would have gotten off the ground. Anyway, soon the Italian Inquisitor was on Moloko's case, so he fled to Palestine, where he took up more intensive studies of the Cabala. He got away from the public eye for a while because too much negative attention now had been focused on him. A few years later, he was back in Italy once again, preaching an imminent judgment day, at which time he declared himself the Messiah. So while in Palestine, he must have hooked up with some of his superiors, and they were, more fully completing his training. Okay, this is what you got to do now. This worked for us so well before. Remember that Jesus character, Judas Christus? You have to talk about Judgment Day and the Messiah, blah, 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 blah. That'll reel them in, Jew and Gentile alike. The Pope, we're told, was so impressed with him. Obviously, another third factioner, right? They must have snuck him in. So impressed that he granted him immunity from the Inquisition. Holy shit. Tell me he wasn't in on the little gag with the third faction, right? I'm going to exempt you from the Inquisition. You can do and say as you please, because you're totally in league with me and the agenda of our third faction Kabbalist buddies. There goes that frickin' third faction manipulation once again, guys. Soon, Ruveni was back in the picture, who joined forces with Molko in Venice to revive the original scheme of selling the lie about the militarist tribe of Reuben that they had tried to sell, a while back. Here they were at it again. Take two. If at first you don't succeed, lie again. So they journeyed together to meet with Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire to enlist his entry into an alliance with the supposed Jewish king against the Turks. Again, it was all bullshit, right? But they used that to make it out to look like they're going to get reinforcements. They were hoping they could muster up a big enough army so that by the time they got there and there were no reinforcements, it would be too late. You got to fight now. And they were hoping that their army would be big enough that they could successfully execute a crusade and take control of Jewland. Anyway, this whole thing, of course, was a setup, hoping to get a massive amount of both Christians and Muslims and Jews to rally behind this cause, this Jewish cause, and yet have them think that it was a Christian cause. And in the case of some of the Muslim participants, a Muslim cause too. We'll be able to take control of this for Muhammad or for Jesus or, for King David or whatever. It's all a group effort, divinely led by God, blah, blah, blah. And in the meantime, turn with me to your Kabbalah, page 57, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, once again, though, their plans went up in smoke. Charles V was not impressed with their story. He had both men chained, locked up, and turned over to the Inquisitor. Molko was burned at the stake. His cult lasted for several centuries thereafter, but then finally died out. That's always how it goes with these messianic figures, right? To this day, there's still followers of Zevi, Frank, still believing that they were the Messiah. There's still people who believe that, of course, uh, Schneerson was the Messiah. Been dead for over 30 years now. Nope, they're still keeping it alive. Some think that he's actually going to return from the grave and set up, the Jew world order, be the Mashiach. They think that he already was the Messiah, but he's going to come back as the kingly Messiah now and rule from Jerusalem. Anyway, the fate of Raveni is unknown. He kind of disappeared off the scene of history from there. But knowing what a shyster he was, he probably weaseled his way out of the Inquisitor's hands and lived out the rest of his life in peace, pilfering the gullible. Probably changed his name, wore a disguise so nobody would know who he was. The most famous of Kabbalistic messiahs, of course, came later, Sabbatai Zevi. We already talked about him. But he employed the very same tactics, right? Working for the third faction, pushing the Cabala, trying to win over first Jews and then Gentiles, even Muslims, right? What a bunch of fucking horseshit. Again, it's the same pattern repeated over and over and over, country after country, century after century. It's always these bastards. And sadly, guys, sadly, the masses fall for it every time. Even though if they had paid attention to history, they'd recognize this bullshit immediately for what it was right away and would never have been taken in by any of these bastards with their frickin' lies. Anyway, Zevi, of course, was hailed as the deliverer by Jews all across Europe as well as in Turkey. He had an advantage because there was a lot of stuff going on in his day, especially Jews being allowed back into England. So that seemed like some divine portent, right? And so when he came along claiming to be the Messiah, that convinced them all the more. He must be the one this time. So, even though his movement, of course, like the rest, did go belly up, the Jews made a lot of progress with him, the third faction. By the way, I got to mention this detail. I don't know if I mentioned this before when I talked about Zevi, but this is an interesting parallel with the previous monkeys that played the same game, all based around the Kabbalah. Zevi also claimed that there was a large Jewish army in Arabia awaiting orders from Sabbatai to attack the Turks so they could lay claim, to Jerusalem. So he played the same game. He tried to muster up a big army to go down and engage in a crusade and, take over the Holy Land. Christians were convinced, too, that this was a great thing, right? Because they wanted the Holy Land, the land where Jesus walked, as much as, the Jews, because they didn't recognize that their religion was a Jewish branch religion. They didn't recognize it then, and they still don't recognize it now. So they were perfect suckers for this horse shit. So there he was claiming the same thing, this fiction of this alleged army. So don't worry, we're going to have a backup too, right within their ranks. They'll be able to attack them right from within. They won't know what hit them. Just to sucker them, to get them to join this fucking crusade. So just as you can see, Jews were orchestrating or trying to orchestrate a crusade here. Who do you think was orchestrating the crusades originally? The Crusades. Fucking Jews from behind the scenes. Of course, the very fact that they were launched by popes ought to tell you it was Jews, right? All the popes have been Jews and fucking crypto Jews. But, yeah, those crusades weren't launched on behalf of Christians or Catholics. It was a Jewish enterprise the whole fucking time. Lying to duped Christians, naturally. Getting them to think it was in their own personal interest. Anyway, but, just like these other fake messianic Kabbalistic figures, his mission, of course, went up in smoke eventually, but not before ruining a bunch of lives, deceiving a lot of people, getting them to support the third faction cause. And, of course, if nothing else, regardless how much it failed in the end, it was a blooming success because it got a lot of Christians to join ranks with Jews, an early ecumenical movement, and it got a lot of them into the Kabbalah. And so anyway, from there, the rest is history, right? We already talked about how once Zevi came along, that later gave birth to the Frankists. Jacob Frank came along and picked up where Zevi left off. And then you had the, uh, ultimately, Chabad Lubavitch. But even before that, you had the Hasidic movement. All of this sprang out of this same shit going back centuries earlier with the third faction, pushing the Kabbalah. And so ultimately now with the Chabad Lubavitch movement, that is the, the cherry on top, right? That was the full manifestation of what they were trying to do. And so now a great many Jews across the board have become, if not outright members, at least participants in Chabad services and whatnot. They're almost completely wedded with Chabad, and it is the most evil and yet the most purest of all Jewish sects, right? It's pure Judaism. That's what Judaism always was. Judaism stripped of the illusion of a moral stance, like the Ten Commandments, right? All of that completely removed, and just pure indulgence in evil. That's what they were always about. That's what the third faction had always pushed for. Anyway, but just look at some of the big names over the centuries that became part of this Kabbalistic movement, right? Third faction movement. Ignatius Loyola, who created the Catholic version of a Jewish secret society, a mystical Kabbalah-based society. His book, Spiritual Exercises, was entirely based on the Kabbalah, right? And of course, he was a Jew, a Sephardic Jew. Nostradamus was heavily into the Kabbalah. All of his quatrains were based on, Kabbalistic nonsensical bullshit. He was also a doctor. Yeah, right. Another Jew. Francis Bacon. Look at all these big names. Big-time Kabbalists. John Dee, of course. Later, along came another Jesuit, Adam Weishaupt, big-time Kabbalist. A Jew, of course. Professor of canon law at Ingolstadt University. A Marrano, right? A poser, pretending to be a Christian. Albert Pike, of course, major Kabbalist. Madame Blavatsky. I'll talk about her down the line. I might even do that pretty soon here coming up. Another major Kabbalah fan. And of course, Manly P. Hall later on in the 20th century. Aleister Crowley. Jumping back again, you got the Medicis, the Borgias, big time third factioner Kabbalists, right? Goddamn Columbus. I forgot to mention Anton LaVey, Michael Aquino, all of them Jews, and all of them rabid hardcore third faction Kabbalists. Look at the toxic influence these son of a bitches have exerted and continue to exert on society. Look how many people in Hollywood, how many rock stars, musicians across the board, rappers, you name it, are all into the goddamn Kabbalah, right? Madonna, look how big, she didn't hide it, right? She boldly proclaimed it. And a lot of people got into the Kabbalah because of her. Yeah, they love that. They almost make it a prerequisite for you to be into that shit, even if you aren't already, to get you into it. And that's the promise of your fame. Even if you don't practice it behind closed doors, act that you do. Go through the motions, sing the praises of the Kabbalah in the public eye to attract as many people. Because once they got you hooked into it, slowly, gradually, insidiously, without even realizing it, they're stripping you of your moral standards, right? That's what it's all about. Dark, evil occultism, or if you want, call it Satanism. It's what it is. The way Christians understand it, right? Satanism is the glorification of evil, the indulgence in evil. It's what it is. Now, I know that there are Satanists who actually are not that way. They don't engage in human sacrifice. They really are. But I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the real hardcore, you know, black magic, human sacrifice, Abramovichian type fucking bullshit, splurting blood all over the place. That's what the Kabbalah is all about. And that's what all these fucking, celebrities are doing. They're recruiting people into this. And so not on day 1 or day 2 or even day 527 necessarily, but sooner or later, as you get more and more into it, you're going to be taken down to the lowest level of human standards. And you won't even know it, though, at the time, because it happens so gradually without you realizing it, right? By the time you realize it, you're so inundated in it now. You can't even get out of it, even if you wanted to. But at that point, you don't have any desire to leave it because it's become your life. It's, you've built everything around it. Just like, Christianity, right? Once you're so completely inundated into the damn thing and your whole worldview is based around it, all of your circle of friends now are Christians because you've distanced yourself from all the people in your life prior to that time that weren't Christians, right? It brainwashes you into cutting off ties with people that don't think like you and believe like you.
They're heathen after all. They're not going to heaven. They don't have Jesus. The devil can use them to pull you away from Jesus.
So you cut yourself off from them little by little. So now your whole life is built around this. It's virtually impossible for most people to cut away from something like that. And so it is with the Kabbalah, right? Once you're so deeply enmeshed in it, you not only can't psychologically leave it, right? You feel the need now because this is your family, this is your community. And you wind up slowly, insidiously, without you realizing it, slowly changing your whole worldview, your moral standards go out the fucking window bit by bit by bit. And so by the time, you've been inundated in the evil of it, you don't even see it anymore, right? It's like when you're on the crapper. You don't smell your own shit, do you? Somebody who walks in and, unexpectedly and says, "Oh my God, you reek." They can smell it because they haven't been enmeshed in it like you have, right? Your sniffer doesn't sense it because it's so immersed in it. It gets anesthetized by it. It gets used to it. And that's how it is when you get immersed into this fucking dark world. It comes upon you gradually, slowly. You're not aware of it. And by the time you become fully immersed in it, you haven't noticed it because, again, boiling the froggy slowly in the pot, the frog doesn't realize the heat's being turned up. By the time it's turned up now to the point where it's going to cook your ass, it's too late. You can't even escape it, right? And it's going to fucking incinerate you. That's how the Kabbalah movement works, how it's always worked. And it's still with us today, as strong and even stronger than ever. Anyway, guys, that concludes this discussion. Lots more to come. Thanks for joining me. We'll catch you in the next video. Take care.